Welcome back to our next speaker of the fourth annual IFC Talks, JAMP Transformational Treatment and the Archetypes. You can't see me. So somebody who can see the archetypes is with us today. We are very excited to have her. Her name is Susanna Barlow, and she's going to present her theory on the archetypes and how she breaks them down. Without further ado, Suzanne, you want to jump in here and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me on your podcast. I feel that it's an honor to be invited here and to be invited to be a speaker at your event. And it was a bit of a surprise to me when I was invited on, because I don't think of myself as an expert or someone who has, a lot of knowledge in this category. Like the idea of being someone who has something to offer in this way has come as a bit of a surprise. My interest in archetypes came unconventionally, and I learned about them on my own, mostly through just like reading books, for example, and noticing certain characters that all shared the same patterns of behavior. Because I'm an avid reader, then I noticed certain patterns in characters in literature first, and then in movies. And I would find that I was attracted to one movie and I would recommend it to someone, and they would watch the movie and they'd be, oh, I hated it. Be like, why? How could you hate it? And it was a good movie. And I realized that there was an archetype in that film that was being expressed that resonated with me. And it was like watching my journey or my story on the screen playing out in front of me. And I was so mesmerized by it. And for the other person that I had recommended it to, there was no connection there. And then there would be an archetype they really connected to, and they'd say, you got to read this book, or you have to watch this film. It's so good. And I would think to myself, oh, what archetype are they going to show me about who they are? Yeah. And so I would then watch the film thinking about my friend and what archetypes were present in them and active in them that made them so interested in that show. And so that was part of my, what I considered a hobby, some fun activity that I did on the side. And then a friend of mine began asking me if I would write about them for my little blog. And I didn't want to at first because I was busy. I was working on other writing projects. And she just kept pressuring me, you have to write about it. It's so interesting. I thought, well, who am I to write about this stuff? We have the great masters, Carl Jung and Marie von Franz, writing about the archetypes, and why me? But I thought, well, no one's going to read my website anyway. I'll do it for my friend. She'll be happy that I did it. And so I began working on these archetypes, and I started with archetypes that her and I had discussed in her, and began thinking about them more deeply and wanting to dig into what made her operate the way she did, and could I see that pattern of behavior in other people? Historical figures, again, character from literature and film, fairy tales. I started to connect these dots, and I would see this pattern emerge, and then I would go back to her and I would say, do you like this character from this, famous musical? And she'd be, oh, that's my favorite. I love that musical. And it would just hit dead on every time I did this. And so I began writing about them and just, letting my imagination lead the way, letting my sense of curiosity guide me rather than what I knew or what I thought I knew, and going down every trail. And some trails led to a dead end, and I would be like, oh, that's wrong. That doesn't fit. Everything's not matching. And other times the whole pantheon of archetypes would open up to me, and I could see so much more than I could before. So after I had written about 10 or 12 of these little articles and posted them on my blog, then I started seeing that they could be organized into categories and groups, and almost like families or tribes, as you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And once I saw that, like the excitement just went through the roof. It was almost like they had always been there asking me to organize them in this way. And I just hadn't quite seen it. And they came together like puzzle pieces, fitting so nicely with each other. And then I began testing them out on clients and people that I would talk to. And more recently, I got hired to work with a production company, helping them with films, short films, and other kinds of videos. They wanted me to help them find the archetypal patterns in stories. And again, they found me on the web through my little blog that I had dismissed as not important, and I'm making it for my friend. And they found me and hired me on as their archetype consultant. And it's really through my work with them that I've been able to have the time and resources to begin really building this model of archetypes, what I'm calling the Bible of archetypes, or the dictionary of archetypes, something like that, to really capture what it means to be a human being. And to do it in a way that gives us these characters so that we don't think of ourselves as islands in a sea of humanity, but rather the connectivity and the belonging, the sense of belonging that we have. Even if we don't live in tribes anymore, and in so many ways our society has lost that communal sense of belonging through the deterioration of small communities, religion, etc., that archetypes bring some of that back, and you end up feeling a connection to people through these shared archetypal patterns and connections. And that's why I think you have video gamers that all like the same games, and they play online with each other, and there's an archetype they're connected to that makes them drawn to those stories in those games. And movie clubs and people who are interested in the same things people are forming their own kinds of tribes that I think are based more on archetypal similarities and patterns than geography, which was once the major binding force among human beings. And so I really wanted to create this model of categories and then subcategories, like these little groups where people belong to each other and they understand one another, and they can talk a language that is almost unique to each group. And through that, I've discovered, listening to people talk, I can point them to a category or a tribe of archetypes. Say, well, what do you think about these? And then I'll read the list to them. And immediately they will be connected to it. They'll want to find the one archetype within that group that speaks to them most intimately and most deeply. And then we'll discuss it in detail. And I'll talk to them about what I see makes two archetypes that are very similar. What makes them different? How do I tell if I have, let's say, a servant or a rescuer? Someone might ask me that. I like to come and help people. I'm always coming to the rescue and wanting to help people. I love to serve. So it can be easy for someone to think, maybe I have the servant because I like to serve people. So then I will talk to them about what makes the servant and the rescuer, in this example, the same, is that desire to do for others, to be there for others, to serve and take care of someone or something or some cause. And the difference between the servant and the rescuer is the rescuer is motivated by crises. So that's what really makes them light up, and it awakens that archetypal energy, is when there's a crisis. So when there's an extreme need, that rescuer is going to want to come forward and become active. In the shadow, the rescuer is an enabler. So the pattern of rescuing and then creating environments in which there is a constant stream of drama and crisis becomes the shadow pattern, so that the rescuer can always show up as the one saving the day. Meanwhile, creating problems, unconsciously, of course, that allow them to be that figure that comes to aid the person that they are rescuing. The servant, on the other hand, is motivated by devotion to, a family, a community, a cause, and they feel very much this desire to do good in the world. And it doesn't matter how small it is. A servant might be someone who picks up garbage on the sidewalk because they feel this sense of service to their community and the cleanliness of it. So it doesn't need to be a crisis. It can just be the most simple acts of service. In the shadow, there is a kind of indentured quality. They feel like that they're stuck, that whomever they give their service to doesn't really appreciate them, and they develop resentment. But they feel obligated. The rescuer, on the other hand, feels connected because of the enabling. So they want to be the hero, but then they also develop resentment and feelings of obligation because sometimes they get tired of being the person that always comes to the rescue. And so that's just a quick, short example of two archetypes and how they're the same and how they're different, and how one person could identify very strongly with one and not as strongly with the other, but relate to them the way a family is related to each other, but all have very different personalities.
It's fascinating. And you spoke earlier to us about how they started coming in dreams. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, in my 20s, I had a dream that I considered it an archetypal dream. In other words, the themes and the symbols were not specific to me. In most dreams, the symbols are you. They're expressions of you. They're parts of your inner world trying to communicate to you. In an archetypal dream, it's like the images come from the collective. Like they're grand images. And so I had this big, profound dream in my 20s. And I was just coming out of a long childhood of trauma and abuse. And I was trying to figure out how to move forward. And I had wanted to just put everything in the past behind me and ignore everything that had happened in childhood and just move on into the future. And I had this dream right when I was on the cusp of all of this, where I was shown a mirror. And here we come into almost fairy tale like symbols. And it was an oval mirror, just like what you'd see in Snow White. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw an old woman. There's another archetypal symbol of the old woman. And as I looked at this old woman, I saw that it was me. And I recognized myself in her. And as I looked back into the mirror, the image faded away and I saw my life pass before me, a life that I had yet to live. Because I was here 24 years old, and now I'm in this dream scenario. I'm this 80-something-year-old woman watching my life unfold as if I had already lived it. And what I saw was that on the surface, my life had looked good and perfect, but underneath it was rotten. And that old woman knew that while the appearance of it looked like a good life, something underneath was rotting it out. And that something was the unresolved trauma of my childhood that was going to follow me through all the way to the end of my life. And it was going to be always rotting away the structure and the foundation of my life. And while it might look okay superficially, deep down, it was not going to be the life that I was meant to live.
That's profound, Susanna.
Yes.
I woke up not knowing really the meaning of this. I was more confused. And that set me on the path of discovery. I had to go find, what are dream symbols? What do they mean? How do I make sense of this dream? And as I began my work, I stumbled onto Carl Jung's work.
Yeah.
And there I first heard the word archetype.
Yeah.
And
yeah, your description of the subcategories, you're talking about the complexes. The complexes are the archetypal pattern, but they're personal.
right.
So the complex is still an archetypal pattern. It's part of the original pattern, but the complex has a very personal type of nature to it. So it starts to filter the personal and the archetypal together and create a story. So what you're describing is the way the complexes appear and how they shape us and how they
Right.
move in the world as archetypal patterns. And people get confused when you say a complex and you say an archetype. They think it's two distinct things. And the way to think about it is the archetypal pattern is the mountain, and the complex is that piece of mountain that you live in, that's your habitat, that you move within that mountain. There's much more inside the mountain if you want to take a gander, if you want to like go in, but this is where you live. This is the pattern that you have chosen to move by, which is a great definition of what you're talking about, of how, the bully and the defender and the servant. So
That's a really great description. I really like the visual of the mountain and your own personal habitat on the mountain.
Yeah.
I also think that people hear the word complex and they think immediately negative.
Yeah. They think
don't realize
it has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
The complex is the archetypal energy. The archetype defends us. And so if you're a magician's archetype per se, or you're defended by the archetype. That defense, that part that envelopes you, depending on the trauma that you suffer in the outside world. It's how the outside world's reacting to you. So you're going to get that energy to defend you. You're going to use that energy as your guide through the world. Because you are using that energy starts to define itself as a pattern of existence. How do I exist in this world? How do I move in this world? Why do I move the way I do? And that's what you're showing. You're showing, well, this is why you put these clothes on. And this is how you start moving in the world from the original archetypal energy. And the original archetypal energy is very, is unified. So all the archetypal patterns show up. But we are more likely inclined on that mountain to move into certain patterns, into certain caves, more than we go and investigate other caves, because these caves are closer to what inspires us, what we think is interesting, it's basically the energy, it's the way it's pushing and the way we go with it.
Right. And that's a great description of that. I often talk about, in my own experience, that if you step into a role that is sort of outside of that habitat, you'll feel the energy of the archetype that dominates that realm, let's say.
Yeah.
And then you can step into it and participate with it and let it influence you, let it guide you. But it's never home. It never feels totally like you. And so you can move in and out of these archetypal energies and they're necessary. But then we always go back to our little cabin in the mountains where we feel we are best represented, where we
Yeah.
feel most at home.
It's the complex that sends you to wear the other skin, to shift shape. The complex sends you, it says, I cannot help you with this. You need to go in this direction. You need to go towards, you want to mate. I don't know how to mate. You need to go talk to the person that knows how to mate. That person will show you how to get a mate. I can't do that for you. You need to go in this direction. So it pushes you out, but as you are in the mating kind of ritual, you start to feel like the pull back, like, okay, I've done that enough. Okay, it's working. Okay, do I need to keep doing it? So you kind of shift back to the archetypal pattern that you basically you live in. That
Right.
you decide,
me,
this is my habitat. This is my energy. I'm going to live here.
Yeah, I think about it like the operating software.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And you're
And
going
that
to,
comes from the archetype, by the way,
right,
because
Right.
we don't create anything. The archetypes are the creators. We are always interpreting backwards. We're always interpreting. They've already made it. We're interpreting it.
right,
And that's why every film has an archetypal pattern, and the pattern is very clear, and it's not going to deviate. And that's why you could guess the entire plot from the beginning, because what you're guessing at, you're not really guessing. You understood the pattern, and so according to the pattern, things are going to unravel in certain ways. Things are going to be presented to you in certain ways, and even the tricks in the pattern are known. There's only
Right.
so many tricks,
Yeah.
right? But they killed James Bond, which drove me nuts. James Bond never dies. They killed him in the movie.
so, and that,
And I was like, how could you kill James Bond? You cannot kill James Bond in a movie.
That's
They
exactly what I
broke
was
the
gonna say.
rule. They
It-
broke the rule.
Mhm.
And that really upset me. I was sitting there going, no, James Bond cannot die. That's just wrong. Like, you replace James Bond all the time. Like, a new James
Yeah.
shows up. But first they had like 2 James Bonds, and then they killed the James Bond who thought he was James Bond, which was, but they actually, they veered from the pattern.
right, when you deviate from it, then people don't like that.
Yeah.
And
No, they don't.
the
Yeah.
films won't do very well, or there will be an outrage,
Yeah.
like you did
Yeah.
it wrong,
Yeah.
because I think we know how
Yeah.
the story is supposed to go. And when it's done well, it becomes a classic.
Yes, that's right.
To me, that's what a classic is in literature and films too. It's when the archetypal patterns are so richly expressed,
Yeah.
but they follow the proper patterns of their own individual archetypal journeys.
Yes.
Because that's how we learn.
Yes.
I think that's how we learn what it is that I need to do and accomplish in my life. How do I overcome this? How do I work through this? I'm not, like my husband or my sister or my brother. I don't have their certain natural tendencies. And so working within your nature, working with those archetypes that are your own operating software,
Yeah.
then allowing those others to influence you as you need them. I have some people ask me sometimes about the mother archetype.
Yes.
And if you become a mother, does that mean you have the mother archetype, personally as part of your software? And I never found that to be the case. But
Yeah.
when I became a mother, boy, did I feel 10,000 years of mother energy.
Yeah, the software kicked
through
in.
me.
Yeah,
Yep.
you were already pre-programmed. That's how
Yep.
it is. Yeah.
And it's like, you're a mother now. Okay, we'll give you the software.
Yeah.
But the minute my kids moved out, that energy just dissipated.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then I know other women who have struggled with this mother energy from before they ever had children, during the child rearing process, and then after the children were gone. It was like they were destined to work through that archetypal pattern, the light and the shadow, and really it was the home that they lived in. and they had to work with it across their entire life. And I started noticing these differences with certain people, that they may have these big ancient archetypes that are part of their life package, if you will, to manage and work with.
Yeah. Well, the complex keeps you active, and it keeps you within the realm of whatever you're trying to work through. So wherever you're stuck within the archetypal mountain, wherever you're stuck, the complex is going to force you to work through it. And the only way to work through it is to call out the complex to let you go, because it doesn't let you go. Therefore, you can't work through it. You're stuck. So you start to have that reaction. You start to have like, I'm trapped by this. I can't seem to. You're trapped because you're stuck in the complex, and the complex is holding you and it's squeezing you. It's telling you, you need to kind of venture out. This is why the dream, when it comes, it's so jarring. It's telling you to step out of what you think you are. Where do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Step out. So it's kind of like pushing you out, like you need to move in this direction, but it doesn't push you in that direction. It tells you this is the direction you need to move in. Hey, dumbass, are you going to move in this direction or not? By the way, I told you this in the last 10 dreams, but it seems like I need to repeat myself. So there's this ongoing kind of thing that pushes constantly. So in your dream, where the mirror that reminds me of Rey in Star Wars, where she goes underneath the island and she sees a reflection of herself, and then the reflection kind of splits off into like hundreds of reflections, and each one of them has a different turn, a different expression. So it was brilliant to, a description of what the archetype looks like. That's beautiful, and that's what you're describing. That's what it looks like. It looks like 1,000 people that look like you, but move in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good description.
And you don't recognize any of them, yet they're all you. You only recognize the pattern that you walk into, that you're moving with. Although the archetypal structures are always present for you to use. Yeah. That's what people in like in spy agencies, what they've learned is to adapt different archetypal styles, to hide.
Right.
The better they are at doing it, the longer they live.
Right. Well, and it takes a certain archetypal tendency to be able to do that in the first place.
Yes.
Yes, but
Not everybody can be a spy.
There's always levels. There is always levels of adaptation, because it's to walk into you are a shapeshifter, basically. What you're talking about, shape-shifting. You're shifting from one mode of being to another mode of being. And then when you see somebody do that, you're like, how do you do that? Like, how do you do that? Well, so everybody has the capacity. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
And if somebody actually has the shapeshifter archetype, for example, in actors, I watch a lot of actors, and sometimes they'll be in a film and they'll just master the role.
Yeah.
And then other times they'll play a part and you're like, that wasn't for you. You're a great actor, but you're not playing to your archetypes.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about the shapeshifter, I was thinking of someone like Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
He can play anybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely anybody. Because I think he has the magician. I think he has that shape-shifting quality as a person, and that's his wheelhouse. Yeah. And so he can just be anybody that he needs to be and play any part that he needs to play. Yeah. And even in his personal life, if you've ever looked at pictures of him, online with different people that he's dating, he always looks like the person he's dating.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's interesting.
his
Yeah.
appearance changes to match the person that
Yeah.
he's dating. So he does a little shape shifting
Yeah.
in his personal life as well as in his films. And then you
Interesting.
have someone like Russell Crowe,
Yeah.
who has a very strong kind of warrior hero type archetype.
Yeah.
And when I saw him play the part of Javert in the film of Les Miserables
Yeah.
that came out
Yeah.
some time ago, I was like, oh, no. I mean, no.
Yeah.
You know, he was playing against that archetype that I felt really exemplified who he is, or what his dominant, strong archetypal presence is. And it went against that. And even though the performance was technically good, you couldn't quite put your finger on what didn't feel right about it. And I think he was not playing to his own archetypes. And when he did, of course, I think his most famous film is Gladiator.
Yeah, I would agree.
And
It was different.
it was totally different. He was in alignment. He was totally congruent with the character and who he is as a person. They were completely lined up.
Yeah.
And so for him to choose roles that go against his archetypes,
Yeah.
they don't do well, and they flop at the box office. And so I also think that's an interesting way to think about our own archetypes when we're trying to be someone that we're not.
Yeah.
And we think, oh, I'm just going to put on this sexy dress and then somehow I'm going to be this goddess. It's like, it doesn't work that way.
Oh, it doesn't. Does it? You're
Yeah.
exposed very quickly.
Yeah, but you can find.
If you're paying attention, but you could hold the mask.
Right.
Yeah. You could hold the mask. I mean, what you're describing with Russell Crowe, it's the term out of body experience. When you do something that's just beyond you.
Right.
Like you do it and you're like, I don't know how to do that. Just like everything worked.
Yeah.
That's the description, and that is embodying the archetype.
So it's
That's
almost
when
like the
you are
archetype.
almost like one. You're on the same, like the energy is moving in one direction. You are not improvising at that point. You're just moving with energy. So when he moves with the energy in another movie like Les Mis, then he screws it up because he's moving with the energy, but the role requires something very different.
Yeah. Anyway, I think those are great examples to look at actors and help people understand how it feels to be in congruence with your own archetypal energies and how to work with them. And when we step out of them, why that doesn't always feel right. And when you understand what is what is the archetype in me that is sensual? Maybe I'm not some, sexy goddess, but maybe I have some archetype in me that is connected to sensuality. So identifying what that is and aligning yourself with that, and then expressing it with that total flow that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Because you're working with that nature, with your own archetypal nature.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to discover their own archetypes that belong in their own house, so to speak, so that they can operate from them and work with the shadow within them instead of always out there trying to be someone that they're not. And it always comes off as phony and pretentious.
Well, yeah, because you're not in your skin.
Right.
You're not in your skin. So people see you as, even if you're trying to be sincere, you don't look sincere because you're not in your skin. You're not in your pattern. You're basically, you're messing with somebody, you're messing with another pattern, and it doesn't feel right.
And other people sense that when they're interacting with you.
Yes, well, they sense a disturbance in the pattern.
Right.
That's what they're sensing. And then they call it like you're not being genuine, or you're not being truthful, or you're lying.
Or you killed off James Bond and you shouldn't be doing that.
They killed James Bond. They killed James Bond. You don't kill James Bond. I've been watching James Bond like for 40 years. You don't kill James Bond. He doesn't die. You know, he's
going to come back.
He's an archetype. You don't kill archetypes. Archetypes don't die.
So I encourage people to come up with a group of archetypes, a list that is theirs,
Yeah.
that they deeply resonate with, that represent that operating system that they function in best.
Yeah.
And I will help them, you know, go through these different categories and find out, who are you?
Yeah.
What are those faces when you look in the mirror, to where they don't look like strangers, that you recognize each one of them individually and as an integrated whole.
Yeah.
And in every situation, you can call for them, almost like calling the actor from backstage. It's like, okay, I need that archetypal energy. I'm going to be going into this job interview, and I really don't want to show up in my most comfortable archetypal role. Who can come and show up in this job interview? And you look at who's already in your nature. Where do you shine? Where are you strong in certain areas? And then bring that energy forward. And then you have a much more integrated way of being in the world.
Susanna, people are going to love having you. And I think experiencing how you see the archetypes and help them find their own. Yeah. I've already told many people you're coming to speak, and they're very excited to have you with us. I think we need another podcast specifically with you.
Yeah, no, we should
do
a podcast on the archetypes with Susanna. Yeah, I'd like to explore her, because basically what you're talking about, Susanna, is Jungian dream interpretation. You're using the way the Jungians use dream interpretation to identify the symbols by free association. You're doing that to draw out their archetypal patterns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, since dream interpretation was my entry point.
Yeah. Well, that's how you see them, because as this conference is called, you know, the subtitles, "You Can't See Me." Basically, what we're talking about is that you cannot see the archetype except when you look in the mirror. You can't see the archetype. The archetype is always grinning behind the mask. It's always grinning behind the curtain, right? So,
yeah.
Well, fascinating. I'm very excited for your presentation.
Me too.
I'm very excited to hear more about you and what you're doing. I think it's fantastic. I love it. Yeah, and we should continue this conversation. I love this conversation. It's great.
Yeah, we will continue it.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to come back and do this again.
Yeah, we'll do a special podcast for Magician's Call. We'll do a special podcast with you.
Great idea.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Susanna.
Thank you, Susanna.
We look forward to having you in Salt Lake City on the 13th, 14th, and 15th of October. If you would like to register, just go to our website at the instituteforconflict.com, and you will see the registration information. You will also see bios for the speakers and the schedule for the event. We will be also handing out more information about the event as the event draws closer, but there are detailed about where to stay, there's plenty of facilities and hotels nearby. So with that, I'm Dr. Lahab Al-Samarrai. This is Christy Foster, and this is Susanna Barlow. Thank you, Susanna, for coming and talking to us today. And we will be back with another presenter for the IFC Talks.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Susanna.
Welcome. Take care. Thank you.
All right.